Okay, good morning, boys and girls. Today I'm going to send you something really upon the request of somebody who asked me to give a final talk or brief note on Edward Said and his book Out of Place. Really, as I told you before, as it's part of the required material for our really term this time, or this term, I should say. I want to give you really a brief note about that, which is, I think, is quite interesting and important. Now, as you know, in the material I sent you in our booklet, I sent you, or there, it's only just one little chapter, the beginning of his book, which is called, as I said, Out of Place. Really, this is an amazing, absolutely lovely text for people to read as a very nice example of autobiography. Now, remember, I have talked to you before about autobiography, and the example I mentioned or we had is Booker Washington. Now, really, the relationship, if you like, or the if you like, in a way, the mutual thing between both Edward Said and Booker Washington really is very important issue, very important question. Both of them, in so many ways, yes, they are talking about their own life, about their own personalities and the way they lived and the way they grew up and the difficulties and the miseries, blah, 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 especially way than Edward Said. Of course, Edward Said was very much different, of course, in terms of the ways in which he was brought up, and got very lovely, good, strong education and blah, blah. The way he lived in Palestine, then moved to Egypt and then to Lebanon and then to America and so on. So he lived really a very, if you like, really rich sort of life. Is absolutely not the same or nothing to do with Booker Washington. Booker Washington, as I said, he was. You see, the idea, I'm trying to connect both of them to the question of really how both indirectly, addressing and talking and criticizing and really attacking so much indirectly underneath, if you like, the question of racism, the question of colonization, the question of displacement. Really, this is my issue here, which I want you to really understand. Here in this question, I want to highlight this idea very strongly in the ways in which he was talking about his life, the absolute misery and the absolute horrible racist, treatment and ugly treatment and so on, the bad life, the marginalized life, the absolute horrible circumstances under which he lived and so on. And also, this question of racism and marginalization also was lived, as we shall see here. So that's why here I'm trying to connect both of them, Booker Washington and Edward Said in this way, about the question of racism, marginalization, and displacement, how you are always displaced. Because, I'm talking here about the word displaced. It's to do with the colonial and post-colonial policies and so on, how, this is always done against people, against the poor, as a very important issue, really, which needs to be addressed and talked about in a very nice way. Now, as I told you in the previous two little videos on Booker Washington, all of this, what I said before about the ways in which he was leading his life and the ways, etc. And I think he talked, the way I explained it to you, it was the whole thing is, as I said, is to reject, absolutely to reject and to undermine against the slaves, how they were, treated in a very bad way in every respect. Till finally, of course, he was saying, how they finally got their freedom. Now, I'm saying here is that all this autobiography, it can be read as a response to say, look, this is how we were living. Look about how our life was, there in plantations and so on. But you see, yes, from political, absolutely political manifesto, political, if you like, rejection of how they were living, how they were, doing, if you like, absolute enslavement for the rich, if you like, white man. Now, Edward Said in Out of Place, remember, as I said, the title is called Out of Place. And that's why I'm saying here the notion of displacement, the idea of that whether Africans were taken from Africa, displaced from their place, from Africa to the West. So this, I was moved from one place to another and so on. Yes, it was. So yes, his movement, we can say it was, if you like, intentional, because his parents moved all these movements from Palestine to Lebanon, and then to Egypt, and then back to Lebanon, and then to the state. Thinking about his own background, his own father and parents, and so on. This is the details he's giving. This now, this historical background. Yes, it's nice, and it's very nice and biographical, as you can see. Remember, this is autobiography, but it has political meanings. It has implications. It has, we have to understand it, how people were forced to do all these things because they were kicked out, kicked out by Zionist and the Jewish, if you like, occupation of Palestine. So that's why he had to emigrate and he had to leave and so on. So from the very beginning, we say here that Edward Said is talking about all his background in this way, in a political sense of displacement. He was kicked out of his place. He was forced to go to Lebanon, and he and his family, and then to Egypt, and then back to Lebanon, and then to America, and so on. So the whole idea to him, it was absolutely political. It was, done deliberately by the Jewish, absolutely the Zionist state in that sense. So that's what I mean here. All his autobiography can be read beyond, as we can see, we have to read beyond lines. So all these details about his nostalgic thing, about his mother and his grandmother and his father, how he went to America and I was a businessman and he wanted to go to the army, about this in the details. Remember, in this little introduction I sent you, really, it's a nice story. When you read it, you would never think that this is something to do with politics or political. Yes, it is very political from that sense, because we have to understand it in this way. How he was forced into all this because of being displaced from his place. So all his autobiography can be interpreted in this sense, plus to, if you like, maybe to behave like that, or to he had to behave like this because he was, as I said, forced to leave his own hometown, home place, and home. So that's why the title for his book, he's called it Out of Place, because he said that, in a very really concluding paragraph, when he was talking about his name and why he was, and he's as an Arab, originally as an Arab boy, why would he be called Edward and then his surname Said, So even his name and his father's family and his mother's and so on, I think he concluded it in a very nice way about how he was destined to make like this. And I think I will show you here the last, in this last paragraph in the notes I sent you. Remember, maybe I will read it for you, and then I will come back to highlight some of the points in the same chapter we have here. Look at the last page here, page 83 in the notes I sent you, the booklet I sent you. Notice he said how I will read this for you and I will show you. Notice what he said. He said, and thus a creation of my parents, whose daily travails a quiet, different, but quiet, dormant inner self was able to observe, though most of the time was powerless to help. Edward was principally the son, then the brother, then finally the boy who went to school and unsuccessfully tried to follow or ignore and circumvent all the rules. His creation was made necessary by the fact that his parents were themselves self-creations, two Palestinians, colonial Cairo, as members of a Christian minority within a large pond of minorities. Notice here, why he's using the word here colonial, as you can see. Again, the question of minority and minorities. Remember, he's talking about himself as a Christian, And again, he said in Cairo, also full of other minorities, with only each other for support, without any precedent for what they were doing, except an odd combination of pre-war Palestinian habit, American law picked up at random, and from my father's decade in the United States. My mother didn't even visit the United States until 1948. The missionaries' influence, incompleted and hence eccentric schooling, British colonial attitudes that represented both the lords and the general run of humankind they ruled, and finally the style of life my parents perceived around them in Egypt, and which they tried to adapt to their special circumstances. And look at his last sentence. Could Edward's position, I love this conclusion, as you can see, he's saying, what could I describe? How can I describe myself except in this? I was just out of place. And I think this is a very lovely, absolutely lovely example here. You can see it. And I think we have maybe two or three examples I will show you that on page, for example, look on page in my, again, booklet, page 76, background and his identity. Notice again, he said about his identity. And I think this is to do again of rejecting how he was made, how he was seen as maybe a stranger, how he was always made to feel as out of place. In this page, you can see paragraph, the second paragraph, third paragraph, and the fifth paragraph. In this page, you find that really absolutely. I'm not going to read that, but you can see it here. A question again of being out of place, of rejecting how he was made into a foreigner in America and so on. And the same thing he repeated on page 77. Again here, I think this is a very lovely, really example. I can maybe show you quickly. Look at it. None, he said, none of this was ever presented to me in sequence, as if his pre-American years by my father as irrelevant to his present identity as my father. Hilda's husband, U.S. citizen, one of the great set series told and retold many times while I was growing up, was his narrative of coming to the United States. Notice here he's using the word narrative, as if to say that his father, he himself in the same way, were were forced to make narratives, to create stories about their life in the same narrative that Booker Washington made about his own life, you know? And really, this is the idea. When you feel you are out of place, you are not at home, you are made to create your own home, to create your own story, to create your own narratives. And I think this is the idea. And notice what he said, version, and was intended in Horatio Algar fashion to instruct and inform his listeners, who were mostly his children and wife. But it was collected and put solidly in place both what he wanted known about himself before he married my mother and what thereafter was allowed into public view. It still impresses me that he stuck to the story in its few episodes and details for the 36 years he was my father until his death in 1719. All the other either forgotten or denied aspects of his story. Not until 20 years after his death did it occur to me that he and I were almost exactly the same age when we, precisely 40 years apart, came to the United States. He to make his life, I to be directed by his script for me, until I broke away and started trying to live and write my own. Of course, you can see he finished the sentence here. And I say to write my own story, to write my own autobiography, to write my own life, to write my own, if you like, history. And really, this is the beauty about this example. Okay, boys and girls, really, this is the idea I want you to understand from this example. Yes, as I said, these are lovely examples about autobiography, right? But this autobiography is very meaningful. It gives us a lot about how people really felt when they were writing these autobiographies. Of course, they felt terrible about the way they were treated and how much they suffered. And really how much they have suffered. They have suffered a lot, absolutely a lot. And really this is it, ladies and gentlemen, today. And I think this is a real lovely conclusion for our course. And I will conclude it here. I really I wish you all of you, boys and girls, successful exam, work hard. And again, today I sent you an example of what is a good, really literary analysis essay. Okay, good luck and have a lovely exam, successful exam. Enjoy yourself, enjoy your summer break, and I'm sure you will all succeed nicely and you will be fine. Stay safe, and inshallah, we will get rid of this corona thing, hopefully, inshallah, soon, and we will come to all of you. Bye-bye.